Today, the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, is unveiling his plan for national security. The presidential candidate is calling for an increased military presence and the rebuilding of our nation's alliances, all while slashing costs at the Pentagon. He's also splitting with his GOP counterparts on the Syrian refugee crisis, saying he would accept refugees coming into the United States despite all these growing fears that ISIS could seed militants into those ranks. The presidential candidate, Governor Bush, joins us now. Governor, thank you for being here.
Happy to be with you.
So I want to start first on your plan for the refugees, because the big concern, of course, is that in less than 6 weeks from now, we're going to have 10,000 refugees from Syria coming into this country, and the fear is that there could be some Islamic militants among them. How can we possibly vet them in such a way as to keep ourselves safe?
Well, first of all, we should have a pause. The governors, the Republican governors and others that have expressed concern, they have legitimate concerns. There's not been any details about what the vetting process is. Look, I was a governor of a state where we accepted refugees, but we didn't have the threat that embedded amongst those refugees, whether they're from Haiti or other places. We had Islamic terrorists that were organized to destroy us, to hurt us. And so I think it's proper to pause, to take the time to create the proper screening. But look, if you're an orphan that has been, a part of the tragedy of the 250,000 innocent lives lost, or if you're a Christian from Mosul, where mass is no longer given because Christians have been obliterated, have been persecuted, have been beheaded. I think it is proper for the United States to accept people that clearly they're not a threat to our country. But it should be done as it always has been done, in a very thoughtful way. This process normally takes more than a year.
You're saying it could take more than a year?
Yeah, I can tell, sure, it does. On average, it always takes more than a year under normal circumstances, and so a thorough vetting process would even take longer. But I can tell you that if you're from a community that has been wiped out because of your faith, because you're a Christian, you know who those people are. It's not the most complicated thing in the world to do. We're dealing with a humanitarian crisis.
So
but
how do you draw the line here?
Absolutely right. We need to.
I want to jump in because you're mentioning Christians.
You have to vet.
You have to vet, and you're saying, okay, if someone's a Christian from Syria, then we'll find a way to get them in. I mean, how do you figure out exactly who you're going to allow in and who you aren't?
You have a thorough vetting process. Look, we're talking about hundreds, we're not talking about millions of people that are in that category. There's a vetting process. It's a thorough process and needs to be made even more thorough. That's what I'm saying. There should be a pause in this whole process for people to understand exactly what the Obama administration is using, because there's no confidence that they're serious about this, and I agree with that.
Okay.
But in the end, we have an obligation, I think, to help people. And ultimately, the way to solve this problem is American leadership in the region. We need to create safe zones inside of Syria so people don't travel to Europe and other places. We need to lead, and this president refuses to do so. You
mentioned traveling to Europe and other places. I mean, Germany is set to take 800,000 Syrian refugees into Germany. What is to prevent some of those folks, some of whom may not be properly vetted, from then coming to the United States? I mean, we enjoy a very open society and open borders, so to speak, with Europe, in that Europeans can travel to our country and we can travel to theirs. Do we run into a situation, Governor, where we now need to be triple checking anybody who's coming in, say, on a French passport that might have ties to the Islamic community?
It is a big challenge, and I think taking in 800,000 refugees, while that may be a humanitarian act, will create significant national security problems for Germany, and ultimately, as you say, because of our visa waiver program, could create problems for us as well. That's why we need to create a solution to this, which is the destruction of ISIS. The only way to resolve this problem is to create a coalition led by the United States, where we have safe havens in Syria, where we have a no-fly zone, where we lead the world to destroy ISIS and to replace Assad so that there is peace and security in Syria. to eliminate this national security threat that you're pointing out.
Now, part of that means expanding our military. That's part of your plan, that we need to increase the number of soldiers that we have and maybe even look at troops on the ground. I mean, how would you go about this?
We need to refund the military. There's been a decade of cuts, $1 trillion of monies that weren't spent. That's a significant amount of money, and we don't have a strategy. Our strategy should be a 21st century strategy where we focus on cyber warfare, expand the reach and power of our special operators, rebuild the Air Force and Army and Marines and Navy. We've allowed for the decline of American military power, and we need to get back to peace through strength, which means that we have to make a commitment of spending more money over the long haul on the greatest fighting force that exists in the world, but has deteriorated markedly in the last 7 years.
Governor, you mentioned cyber warfare. I mean, we really are living in a new day and age, obviously with terrorism itself, but also the way these terrorists communicate online. This, of course, has become very much an issue here at home ever since Edward Snowden's revelations. And there's concern now that we are challenged in our effort to balance privacy with also going after the bad guys. Is our intelligence community hindered right now as a result of the scale back in what the NSA is able to do?
I think we are, and I think there should be a reevaluation of the reauthorization of the Patriot Act to include the metadata program that is now going to be canceled out by the end of this month. I think there should be a reconsideration of that. There's no evidence of any violation of civil liberties because of the metadata program. It's part of a mosaic of strategies to keep us safe. And there's ways to create protections. We have the FISA court. We have the ability to protect civil liberties in our country. But we need to be vigilant because, as you say, most of this communication, as ISIS exists in the form of a caliphate, each day they send out hundreds of thousands of messages all around the world, including the United States, to identify people that want to create chaos in our own country. And so I think it's appropriate for us to monitor those activities of Islamic terrorists around the world.
Governor, what do you consider the biggest threat to the United States right now?
Well, we have a multitude of threats for sure. An aggressive Russia, a China and its ascendancy that could create problems down the road, nuclear proliferation, which is a serious problem. But I think the biggest threat today, and I laid this out in a speech to the Reagan Library 2 months ago, is Islamic terrorism, this asymmetric threat that is organized to destroy Western civilization. And we should take them at their word and realize that only the United States can create a coalition to defeat them.
Governor Bush, we appreciate you being here and giving us this preview. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.